teacher zombified by saying you have no future, but what the student did left him in tears. A heavy silence fell over the classroom when teacher David Thompson pointed his finger directly at Tyler Wilson. The 17-year-old boy felt his stomach tighten as all eyes turned to him, knowing something bad was coming. "You, Tyler Wilson," said the teacher with a voice full of disdain, "have no future. You're just another loser who will end up delivering pizza for the rest of your life, just like your father who abandoned you." Laughter echoed through the classroom like daggers. Tyler lowered his head, feeling his face burn with shame. It was on the very day he needed to ask for a recommendation letter, for the only internship that could change his life. The form was right there in his trembling hands when teacher David snatched it from him and, without hesitation, tore it to pieces in front of all his classmates. "It would be a waste of time," David declared, throwing the pieces in the trash. "You will never amount to anything in life." From the hallway, hidden behind the slightly open door, Mrs. Tanya Wilson watched everything with a broken heart. The school custodian had just finished cleaning the second-floor classrooms and was heading down to get her cleaning supplies when she heard the teacher's raised voice. She knew that tone well. It was the same one he used when he spoke to her, as if she were less than others. When the bell rang and the students left, Tanya entered the classroom still holding the mop. David was organizing his papers when he saw her. "What did you do to my son?" she asked, her voice trembling with contained anger. David didn't even look up from his papers. "I just told the truth. Your son isn't capable of anything beyond manual labor. He'd better accept that soon." "He's smart, teacher. He was always the best student in math until you started picking on him." David finally looked at her, a cruel smile on his lips. "Tanya, you clean bathrooms for a living. Do you really think you have the authority to talk to me about education? If you complain to the principal, I'll make sure you're fired tomorrow." The threat hit Tanya like a punch to the stomach. She needed that job. The rent, the food, the medicine for her sick mother. Everything depended on her work at the school. That night, Tyler found his mother crying in the kitchen of the small apartment where they lived in the South Bronx in New York City. "Mom, don't do anything," he begged. "Please, you need to keep your job. I'll figure something out." "But son, what he did was wrong." "It doesn't matter, Mom. I'm going to prove him wrong, without causing trouble for anyone." Tanya hugged her son, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. Tyler was only 17, but he had been carrying adult responsibilities ever since his father abandoned them 5 years ago. The next morning, Tyler woke up before sunrise. He had made a decision during his sleepless night. If he couldn't get help at school, he would look elsewhere. The New York Public Library was 3 subway stops away, but he had a student pass. Arriving there at 7 in the morning, he waited for it to open. When the doors opened, he went straight to the computer section. He needed to research the internship, maybe find another company, another path. But when he tried to use the computer, the staff member called him over. "Sorry, dear, but you can't use it. There's an old fine here in the system from 2018. It looks like someone in your family didn't return some books." Tyler felt his world collapse again. Of course it was his father. Before he left, he had borrowed books and never returned them. Just another mark that man had left on their lives. How much is the fine? $150. It was more than the family had for food that week. With tears in his eyes, Tyler walked to a table at the back of the library. At least he could use the books right there. He picked up some on advanced math and programming, subjects that had always fascinated him, but that he had never been able to study properly. It was then that a soft voice interrupted him. "May I sit here, dear?" Tyler looked up and saw a grey-haired lady with delicate glasses and a gentle smile. She must have been about 70, wearing a simple but well-kept floral blouse. "Of course, ma'am." "My name is Margaret Davis. And you?" "Tyler Wilson." Mrs. Davis noticed the books on the table and her interest grew. "Advanced math. How interesting. Do you study that in school?" Tyler gave a bitter smile. "Not exactly. My teacher thinks I don't have the capacity for these things." "Nonsense," said Margaret firmly. "Teachers can be wrong too, you know. I was a teacher for 40 years. I've seen many talents wasted because of prejudice." Something in her voice touched Tyler. For the first time in a long time, someone wasn't looking at him with pity or scorn. "What did you teach, Mum?" "Math. I retired 5 years ago, but I still come here every day. Books have been my company since my husband passed away." They talked for 2 hours. Margaret was impressed with Tyler's natural grasp of numbers and logic. When he mentioned the fine that prevented him from using the computers, she didn't hesitate. "Use my card," she offered. "You need to study, and I hardly use it anyway." "I can't accept that, Mrs. Davis. You don't even know me." "Exactly. I have no prejudices about you. Come on, accept it." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the days that followed, Tyler established a routine. He woke up early, went to school where he endured the silent humiliations from his teacher, David, and then rushed to the library. Margaret was always there, and she gradually began to discreetly guide him. "You have a gift for math, Tyler," she would say, "but you need direction. How about we try some more advanced exercises?" The lady brought books from home, materials she had used when teaching at private schools in the city centre. Tyler absorbed everything like a dry sponge absorbs water. One afternoon, while Tyler was solving calculus problems that even college students struggled with, Margaret watched with growing admiration. "Son, have you ever thought about applying for engineering or computer science? Mrs. Davis, people like me don't go to public university. That's for people with money." "Nonsense. You have more than enough intelligence. It's just a matter of preparation." It was then that Margaret suggested something that would change everything. "How about we study for the entrance exams together? I'll help you at my place on weekends. I live alone anyway, and it would be a pleasure to have company." Tyler could hardly believe it. Someone was willing to bet on him. But teacher David soon found out about the situation. A library employee who knew someone from the school commented about the young man who was always studying with an elderly lady. The following Monday, David called Tyler into the principal's office. "I heard you've been making friends with an old lady at the library," he said with malice. "Be careful, Tyler. It can be dangerous to accept help from strangers, especially when you're poor and vulnerable." "She's a retired teacher, Mr. Thompson. She just wants to help me study." "That's what she says. But why would someone do that without wanting anything in return? Think about it." The words planted a seed of doubt in Tyler's heart. Did Margaret have ulterior motives? Why would someone be kind to him without wanting anything? That afternoon he arrived late at the library, still troubled. Margaret noticed immediately. "Did something happen, son?" Tyler hesitated before talking about the conversation with the teacher. Margaret listened to everything in silence, her expression growing more and more serious. "Tyler, look at me," she finally said. "Do you think I have some ulterior motive?" "I don't know, Miss Margaret. Why would anyone help me for free?" Margaret sighed deeply. "Because I was once young like you, because I had teachers who believed in me when no one else did, and because I see in you the same spark I saw in dozens of students who are now doctors, engineers, teachers. Your teacher is trying to sabotage you, Tyler. Don't let him succeed." The words touched the young man's heart deeply. Here was someone who saw something in him that even he didn't know existed. "Will you accept my help, really?" "I will, Miss Margaret." "I will, Miss. And thank you very much." The weekends at Margaret's house became the highlight of Tyler's week. The simple but cozy little house in the Park Slope neighborhood was a world different from what he knew. Walls filled with books, a table always set for coffee, the smell of homemade cake that Margaret made a point of serving. "My granddaughter lived with me until last year," she would say while preparing the coffee. "When she got married and moved upstate, the house became too quiet. You brought life back in here." Tyler felt at home. For the first time, he had someone who truly believed in his potential. The months passed and Tyler's progress was impressive. Margaret had managed to get some old college entrance exams and practice tests. The results were consistently high. "You are ready," Margaret announced one August afternoon. "Let's apply for the Columbia University entrance exam, computer engineering." "Columbia? Miss Margaret, that's really hard." "Hard for those who aren't prepared. You are prepared." But when they went to register, they discovered the deadline had been extended due to system problems. They had only 2 weeks until the test. "That's not much time," murmured Tyler. "It's the time we have," Margaret replied with determination. "We'll use every minute." The next 2 weeks were intense. Tyler skipped classes whenever he could, preferring to study at the library with Margaret. Mrs. Tanya was supportive, even without fully understanding. She saw a sparkle in her son's eyes, something she hadn't seen in years. Professor David noticed the absences and, on the eve of the exam, called Tyler in again. "I heard you're going to try the entrance exam," he said with irony. "I hope you're not too disappointed when you fail. Some people just aren't born for certain things." "I'm going to try anyway, Professor." "Try. But when you fail, I want you to remember that I tried to prepare you for reality. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it's necessary." Tyler left there more determined than ever. It wasn't just for him now. It was for Margaret, who had dedicated so much time and care. It was for Mrs. Tanya, who worked so hard to give him opportunities, and in a way it was also to prove that David was wrong. On the Sunday of the exam, Tyler woke up early. Margaret had offered to go with him to the university, but he preferred to go alone. He needed to face this on his own. Arriving at the Columbia University campus, he was impressed by the size and beauty of the place. Thousands of young people walked hurriedly, carrying study materials, some accompanied by their parents. Tyler felt small for a moment, but remembered Margaret's words, "You deserve to be here as much as any of them." The first surprise came when he entered the exam room. Seated at one of the front desks, as a proctor, was Professor David. The man smiled maliciously when he saw Tyler. "What an interesting coincidence," he murmured, while checking Tyler's ID. "I hope you're prepared for reality." Throughout the entire math test, David made a point of walking near Tyler's desk, whispering unsettling comments. "This question is tough, huh?" he said quietly. "Maybe you should just guess. Be careful not to leave the sheet blank. It looks bad." Tyler felt his heart race with each comment, but he forced himself to remember the exercises he did with Margaret. He took a deep breath and focused. The questions weren't so different from the problems he had solved on weekends. One by one, he found the answers. David noticed the boy's concentration and intensified his nasty comments. "Your calculations are way off," he murmured as he passed by. "You should review everything." But Tyler didn't let it shake him. He had learned from Margaret that math doesn't lie. If the calculations were correct, the answer was right. When he finished the test an hour early, David didn't hide his surprise. "Are you sure you don't want to review?" he asked loudly, making other test-takers look. "I'm sure," replied Tyler, handing in his test and walking out with his head held high. The tests for the other subjects went by without incident. Tyler felt confident, but he didn't want to get his hopes up too high. Margaret was waiting for him at the library on Monday, anxious for news. "How did it go, son?" "I think it went well, Mrs. Davis, but now we wait." The 2-month wait was long. Tyler returned to his school routine where David didn't miss an opportunity to make sarcastic comments about certain illusions and unrealistic expectations. Mrs. Wilson noticed her son's growing nervousness as the result day approached. "Whatever the result, son, I'm already proud," she said one night. "You tried. That's more than many people do." "Thank you, Mom, but I need to make it. I need to prove it's possible." On the morning of the results, Tyler woke up at 5 a.m. He couldn't get back to sleep. At 8, when the website opened for queries, he was in the library with Margaret, both shaking with nerves. "You check," said Margaret. "I don't have the courage." Tyler typed his registration number with trembling hands. The page loaded slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. When the result appeared, the two were silent for several seconds. "First place," whispered Tyler. "Mrs. Davis, I got in first place." Margaret began to cry. She hugged Tyler tightly, repeating, "I knew it. I knew you could do it." The news spread quickly. The librarian who knew them was one of the first to know. Soon after, it reached the ears of the school employee who had commented about Tyler with Professor David. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. David received the news during the class break. His first reaction was disbelief, then anger. "That's impossible," he murmured to himself. "There must have been some mistake." That afternoon he went to the school administration. "I need to report a possible irregularity," he said to the academic coordinator, Jennifer Reynolds. "A student of mine supposedly got first place at Columbia University, but that's impossible. He can barely solve basic equations." "Are you talking about Tyler Wilson?" asked Jennifer. "I just received a call from the university congratulating the school. It's an honor to have a student accepted with that ranking." "Jennifer, I'm telling you there's something wrong. That boy doesn't have the intellectual capacity for this. There could have been fraud." The coordinator looked at David with surprise. "David, are you suggesting that a 17-year-old boy committed fraud on the Columbia University entrance exam? Do you hear what you're saying?" "I'm saying I know my students, and that one has no academic future." "Well, the university doesn't seem to agree with you," Jennifer replied coldly. "And I intend to publicize this achievement. It's a point of pride for the entire school." David left the coordinator's office furious. He couldn't accept that Tyler had achieved something that completely contradicted his view of the young man. The following week, the story grew bigger. A journalist from the local newspaper heard about the case. A young man from the outskirts who got first place at Columbia University, son of a cleaning lady studying in a public library, and decided to write a piece. The article came out on Sunday. "From South Bronx to Columbia, Tyler Wilson's story of overcoming adversity" was the headline. There was a photo of Tyler with Margaret at the library, another with Mrs. Tanya at home, and a third at the school's entrance. David read the article with a knot in his stomach. There was Tyler being treated like a hero, talking about dreams and persistence. And there was a quote that bothered him especially. "Even when people told me I had no future, I kept believing it was possible," Tyler said in the interview. Although he wasn't named directly, David knew he was the implied subject. The school community knew it too. On Monday, David arrived at school and felt the stares. Colleague teachers who had read the article greeted him strangely. "Beautiful story, huh, David?" commented Sarah, the English teacher. That Tyler was always a special boy. Special? David couldn't contain himself. "You don't know what he's really like in the classroom. Must be why he got first place at Columbia," Sarah said sarcastically. The day was difficult for David. In every class, he felt the weight of the students' curious stares. Everyone knew about Tyler. Everyone had read the article. During the break, a group of students approached him. "Professor," said Madison, a senior, "is it true that you said Tyler had no future?" "Where did you hear that?" "Everyone knows, Professor. Tyler told some friends after he got accepted." David felt his face grow hot. "I was just being realistic about his academic expectations. Sometimes it's better to be honest." "But he got first place, Professor," insisted another student. "How do you explain that?" "Luck," David replied curtly, turning his back on the students. But inside he knew it wasn't luck, and that bothered him deeply. That night, David came home carrying the weight of frustration. His wife, Rebecca, noticed his dark mood. Did something happen at school? David told her about Tyler, about the newspaper article, about the stares and comments from his colleagues. "I don't understand your reaction," said Rebecca. "You should be proud. It's your former student who achieved something important." "Rebecca, you don't understand. I've known this boy for 2 years. He doesn't have the academic profile for this." "Or maybe you failed to recognize his potential," she retorted. The words hit David like a bullet. Rebecca rarely confronted him like that. "What are you implying?" "David, you've become very bitter these last few years. Too critical of the students. Too pessimistic about everything. Maybe it's time to reflect on that." David isolated himself in his home office, but his wife's words echoed in his mind. Had he really been unfair to Tyler? No, he thought. The boy must have had outside help, some preparation he wasn't aware of. It was then he remembered the conversation about the lady at the library. Of course, that was it. Someone had specifically coached Tyler for the entrance exam. The next morning, David decided to investigate. He went to the New York Public Library during his lunch break. The receptionist greeted him cordially. I'm looking for information about a young man who comes here, Tyler Wilson. I heard he studies with an elderly lady. Oh, yes. Tyler and Mrs. Davis. They're always studying together. They're so cute. This Mrs. Davis, is she a private tutor? Not that I know of. She's been coming here alone for years. She started helping Tyler when she saw him studying. A very kind person. David left the library even more disturbed. It wasn't professional preparation. It was just a retired lady who had taken an interest in the young man. During the following weeks, the situation at the school became increasingly uncomfortable for David. The administration decided to pay tribute to Tyler, inviting him to a special ceremony. "We'd like you, as the math teacher, to say a few words about Tyler," said Principal Jennifer. "I'd rather not participate," replied David. "Not participate? He was your student." "Jennifer, I have my reasons." The principal looked at him with an expression that mixed surprise and disappointment. "David, I need to talk to you. I'm hearing comments about your attitude towards Tyler. Students saying you discouraged him, that you made inappropriate remarks. They're just rumors. They're consistent rumors, and from reliable sources, including other teachers who witnessed situations." David felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "Are you questioning my professional conduct?" "I'm trying to understand what happened. Why did a student you described as having no potential achieve such an impressive acceptance? Maybe he tried harder afterward, or maybe you misjudged him from the start." The meeting ended tensely. David knew his credibility was shaken. That afternoon, as he walked through the empty school hallways, he stopped in front of the classroom where he had humiliated Tyler months ago. The memory came back vividly. The boy with his head down, his classmates laughing, the internship form being torn up. For a moment, David saw himself as an outside observer of that scene, and for the first time he felt something he didn't expect. Shame. What had led him to treat Tyler that way? Why had he been so cruel to a young man who just wanted an opportunity? The answers didn't come easily, but David began to notice patterns in his behavior. It wasn't just with Tyler. In recent years, he had become increasingly bitter with students, especially the poorer ones. When he got home that night, Rebecca noticed his dejected expression. "Do you want to talk about what's going on?" David looked at his wife, the woman who had shared his life for 15 years. She deserved honesty. "I think I made a serious mistake," and he admitted. "I was unfair to that boy, Tyler." "Why do you think you did that?" The simple question opened an emotional floodgate that David had kept closed for years. "Remember when I was younger, how I dreamed of making a difference in education?" "I remember. You wanted to transform lives through math." "Yeah. But somehow over the years I became bitter, seeing so many uninterested students, so much lack of family structure, so much disrespect. I think I stopped believing it was possible to make a difference. And you ended up projecting that frustration onto Tyler." "He reminded me of myself as a teenager," David continued. "Poor, son of a single mother, no father present. I hated that feeling of pity people had for me. And I think when I saw Tyler, I saw everything I detested about my own origins." It was the first time David had put these feelings into words. Rebecca listened in silence, holding her husband's hand. "Did you know I also got first place on an important test when I was young?" he continued. "A scholarship exam. My teacher at the time doubted me, just like I doubted Tyler. And how did you feel? Humiliated, belittled. I promised myself I would never do that to anyone. But I did exactly that to Tyler." The conversation stretched into the early hours of the morning. David revisited memories he had buried, confronted aspects of himself he preferred to ignore. "What do you intend to do now?" asked Rebecca. "I don't know. How do you apologize for something like that? How do you fix such a big mistake?" In the days that followed, David observed Tyler from afar whenever he saw him at school. The young man walked differently now. There was a confidence in his step, a sparkle in his eyes that David had never noticed before. One afternoon, David witnessed a conversation between Tyler and some younger classmates. "How did you do it, Tyler?" asked a freshman boy. "I want to try for Columbia too, but everyone says it's impossible for someone who studies here." "It's not impossible," Tyler replied. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. The important thing is not to give up, even when people say you can't do it. But what if I'm not smart enough? Look, I spent a long time thinking I wasn't smart. I had teachers who made me believe that. But I discovered that intelligence isn't something you either have or you don't. It's something you develop. David heard every word, every bit of encouragement Tyler offered his younger classmates. It was everything he, as a teacher, should have been doing, but had stopped doing long ago. That night, David made a decision. He looked up Margaret's address in the phone book and decided to visit her. When Margaret opened the door of her home in Park Slope, her surprise was evident. "Professor David, how did you get my address?" "Phone book. May I come in?" "I'd like to talk with you." Margaret hesitated for a moment, but her politeness won out. "Of course, come in." The cozy home contrasted with David's emotional state. Margaret served coffee and waited for him to speak. "I came here to understand what you saw in Tyler," he said finally. "I see that's a sincere question," Margaret replied carefully. "I saw an intelligent young man who was being underestimated. By me. Not just by you. By the situation. By the circumstances. By the way society looks at people like him. Why did you help him?" Margaret was silent for a few moments, gathering her thoughts. "Professor David, may I ask you a personal question? Did you always want to be a teacher?" The question caught David off guard. "Yes, since I was a kid." "And why?" Because I had teachers who believed in me when no one else did. I wanted to do the same for other young people." "Then you understand why I helped Tyler." The simple answer hit David like a lightning bolt of clarity. Margaret had done for Tyler exactly what some teachers had done for him decades ago. "I failed him," David admitted. "You did, yes. But there's still time to fix it." "How? How do you fix something like that?" "By starting to acknowledge the mistake, and then, if possible, by apologizing." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just getting started. Now, continuing. David left Margaret's house transformed. For the first time in years, he saw clearly what he had become and how far he had strayed from his original ideals. But apologizing to Tyler wouldn't be simple. How do you approach someone you publicly humiliated? How do you regain trust after so much damage? During the following weeks, David observed Tyler even more closely. He noticed how the young man helped classmates struggling with math, how he encouraged other students not to give up on their dreams. It was everything a teacher should be, but that David had forgotten to be. The opportunity arose unexpectedly. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, David was grading papers in the teacher's lounge when he heard raised voices in the hallway. He went out to see what was happening and found Tyler consoling a crying sophomore girl. "I'm not going to make it," she sobbed. "Math is too hard for me. I'm going to fail again." "Don't say that, Jessica," Tyler said patiently. "Math seems hard at first, but it's like learning to ride a bike. It seems impossible until you get it. But I've tried so hard already. Do you want me to help you? I can explain it a different way." David watched the scene for several minutes. Tyler had taken out a notebook and pencil and was explaining quadratic equations in a simple, clear way. The girl began to understand, her eyes lighting up as the pieces of the mathematical puzzle clicked into place. "Wow, it makes sense this way," she exclaimed. "Why didn't any teacher explain it like this?" The innocent question hit David like a stab. Why didn't he explain it that way? Why had he lost the patience to find different ways to teach? When Tyler and Jessica finished studying, David approached. "Tyler, can I talk to you for a moment?" The young man immediately tensed up. There was still fear and resentment in his eyes when he looked at the teacher. "Yes, sir." "I watched you helping Jessica. It was very enlightening." Tyler didn't respond, just waited for what would come next. "Tyler, I need to apologize to you." The words came out harder than David expected. Tyler blinked several times, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I was unfair to you, very unfair. And I have no excuse for it." "Sir, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You deserved support and I discredited you. You deserved encouragement, and I humiliated you. You deserved a teacher who believed in you, and I was the exact opposite of that." Tyler remained silent, processing the words. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, expecting you to forget what happened," David continued. "I know I hurt you badly, but you need to know that I was wrong, completely wrong." "Why did you do that?" asked Tyler, his voice low and filled with pain. "Why did you hate me so much?" The direct question forced David to be equally direct. "Because you reminded me of myself at your age, and I hated being reminded of what it was like to be poor, what it was like to be underestimated, how much it hurt when people doubted me." "So you did to me what was done to you?" "I did, and there's no excuse for that. A teacher should be a bridge, not an obstacle." Tyler was silent for several minutes. David respected the silence, letting the young man process. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," Tyler said finally. "It hurt a lot, and it still hurts. I understand, and I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong, that you always had potential, and that I'm proud of what you've achieved, in spite of me, not because of me." The conversation ended there, but something had changed between them. Tyler left less tense. David felt less burdened. In the following weeks, David began a quiet transformation. He revisited his teaching methods, looked for more patient ways to explain difficult concepts, and stopped making sarcastic comments about students' struggles. Other teachers noticed the change. "David, you're different," Sarah commented during a break. "More human." "I'm trying to remember why I became a teacher," he replied. The change didn't go unnoticed by the students either. David started arriving earlier, making himself available to answer questions before class. His approach became more encouraging, his explanations more patient. One afternoon, Jessica, the girl Tyler had helped, approached David after class. "Professor, thank you for changing the way you explain things. It's much easier to understand now." "That's great, Jessica. Keep up the good work." "Professor, can I ask you a question? Were you always like this?" David hesitated before answering. "No, Jessica. I had lost my way a little bit, but I'm trying to find the teacher I wanted to be again." Months passed. Tyler Wilson graduated with the top grades in his class and began the computer engineering program at Columbia University. David kept track of his progress through comments from other teachers and the school administration. During the July break, David ran into Tyler at the New York Public Library. The young man was there with a group of younger students, helping them prepare for their college entrance exams. "May I sit?" David asked. Tyler nodded. "Yes." They watched the young students for a few minutes. "You're doing beautiful work here," said David. "It's the least I can do. Mrs. Davis helped me. Now it's my turn to help others. Have you created a project?" "Not officially, but people come every Saturday. We study together, I answer questions, I lend out materials." David looked around and saw about 15 young people, most clearly from humble backgrounds, hunched over books and exercises with the same determination Tyler had shown months before. "Can I ask you a question?" said David. "Why do you do this?" "You could be enjoying your vacation resting," Tyler thought before answering. "Because I know how hard it is to study alone. I know how painful it is when people tell you that you can't do it. If I can keep others from going through that, why wouldn't I?" The answer touched David deeply. Here was an 18-year-old demonstrating a maturity and generosity that few adults possessed. "Tyler, can I make you a proposal?" "What kind of proposal?" "How about if I helped you all here?" "Officially. I could coordinate a school project, get resources, formalize this." Tyler looked at David with surprise. "You would do that?" "I would, if you agreed to work with me." The young man was silent for a few moments, watching his peers studying. "Okay," he said finally, "but on one condition." "What is it?" "You have to promise that you will treat all these kids the way you would want your own son to be treated." The simple condition held a depth that struck David to his core. It was exactly what he had failed to do with Tyler. "I promise," he said, extending his hand. Tyler shook the offered hand, sealing not just a work agreement, but a kind of peace between them. The Bridges to the Future project officially began in the second semester. David secured support from the school administration, which provided a classroom on Saturdays. Margaret joined as a volunteer, along with other retired teachers David knew. The results were impressive. By the end of the first year, 12 of the project's 15 students had gained admission to public universities. The local media discovered the story and ran a new article, this time highlighting the partnership between David and Tyler. "How did this partnership come about?" the journalist asked David. "Tyler taught me that a mistake doesn't define a person forever," he replied, "and that it's never too late to start over the right way." "And for you, Tyler, what's it like working with your former teacher?" "I learned that people can change," said Tyler, "and that forgiving isn't forgetting, but giving a chance for something new to grow." The article had a bigger impact than expected. Local businesses began offering support to the project. Publishing houses donated books. A technology company provided computers. David was completely transformed. The bitter, discouraging teacher was replaced by someone who saw potential where others saw limitations. His reputation at the school changed radically. A year later, during Tyler's class graduation, David was chosen by the students to give the farewell speech. When he went up on stage, he saw Tyler in the audience next to Mrs. Tanya and Margaret. "Dear graduates," he began, "a year ago I would not have been the right person to give this speech, because I had lost sight of the true purpose of education." The auditorium fell completely silent. "One of you taught me that our role as educators is not to judge who has a future and who doesn't. Our role is to be a bridge so that everyone can reach their dreams." David looked directly at Tyler. "This young man showed me that when we genuinely believe in someone's potential, miracles can happen. And when we don't believe, we create self-fulfilling prophecies." After the speech, Tyler approached David. "Professor, thank you." "For what?" "For allowing yourself to change, for giving me a second chance to see who you really are. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it." 2 years later, the Bridges to the Future project had expanded to 3 schools in the region. Tyler, now in his 3rd year of engineering, continued as the student coordinator. Margaret, at 73 years old, was the pedagogical supervisor. David had become the project director, a position that gave him more autonomy to implement his ideas. One Saturday morning, David arrived early at the school to prepare the class materials. He found Tyler already there organizing the desks. "You're early today," David commented. "I have a surprise for you." Tyler went to his backpack and took out an envelope. "What's this?" "Open it." David opened the envelope and found a letter from a technology company in New York City. It was a job offer for Tyler, with an excellent salary and great prospects for growth. "Tyler, this is wonderful. Congratulations." "Thank you, but that's not all." Tyler took another paper out of the envelope. It was a power of attorney and some legal documents. "I don't understand." "I'm officially transferring the project coordination to you. And there's one more thing." Tyler went to the window and pointed to the parking lot. David looked and saw a brand new economy car with a big red bow on the hood. "Tyler, what is this?" "My first paycheck. Well, the first 3 months, actually. I want you to use it to go to and from the project, to pick up materials, to do everything that needs to be done." David was speechless. Tears began to stream down his face. "Tyler, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can. You changed my life, and through the project you're changing the lives of dozens of other young people. This is the least I can do." "But it's too much." "Professor David," Tyler interrupted him, "do you remember what you told me on the first day of the project? That our role is to be a bridge?" "I remember." "Well then, accept being my bridge now. This car will allow you to go further, to help more people. It's my way of giving back." David hugged Tyler tightly, crying without shame. "How can you be so generous after everything?" "Because I learned that holding a grudge only hurts yourself, and because you showed me that people can really change." At that moment, other students from the project began to arrive. When they saw David and Tyler hugging, they understood something special was happening. "Everyone," said Tyler, "I want to officially introduce the new General Director of the Bridges to the Future Project, Professor David Thompson." Applause echoed through the room. David, still emotional, managed to say, "I promise all of you that I will work to be worthy of this trust, and I promise that I will never again doubt the potential of any one of you." When they went down to the parking lot to see the car, Margaret was there waiting. "Mrs. Margaret," said David, "did you know about this? Tyler told me yesterday, and I wanted to be here to see it." "To see what?" "To see a miracle happen, to see how love can transform even the most difficult situations." David received the car keys from Tyler's hands, but it was Tyler who received the keys to something much greater, the certainty that he had managed to turn pain into purpose, resentment into generosity, an enemy into an ally. As David drove his new car for the first time, with Tyler in the passenger seat explaining the vehicle's features, they both knew that this wasn't just the giving of a gift. It was the conclusion of a journey of redemption that had transformed not only their own lives, but the lives of all the young people who had been through the project. "Tyler," David said while driving, "do you have any idea how many lives have changed because of your generosity? It wasn't just my generosity, Professor. It was your courage to change. A lot of people wouldn't have had that courage, and a lot of people wouldn't have had your capacity to forgive." They drove in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. "Professor," Tyler said finally, "can I make a confession?" "Of course." "When you humiliated me in that classroom, I thought about giving up on everything, on studying, on dreaming, on trying. And what made you continue? My mother. And later, Mrs. Margaret. But also something you said." David was surprised. "Something I said motivated you? You said that I would never amount to anything in life, and I thought I'm going to prove him wrong. Not out of anger, but because something inside me knew you were wrong. And you certainly did. But the most important thing is that you also proved yourself wrong." "How so?" "You thought you had become a bad teacher forever, but you proved that you still had the generous teacher inside. You just needed to find him again." Tyler's words touched David deeply. It was true. He had found himself again through that painful but transformative experience. When they got back to the school, they found Mrs. Tanya waiting at the gate. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to see this famous car," she said, smiling. "And mainly, I came to thank Professor David." "Mrs. Tanya, I'm the one who should be thanking you. Professor, you have no idea what you did for my family. Tyler would come home destroyed after class. I saw my son losing his self-esteem, losing his will to study." David lowered his eyes, ashamed of the memory. "But after you apologized, after you started working together, my son flourished. He became a different boy. No, he became the boy he always was, but who was hidden under so much pain." "Mrs. Tanya, let me finish, Professor. You saved my son, and now you're saving other sons of other mothers. That is priceless." Tanya hugged David, who was moved once again. "Thank you for not giving up on him, even when I deserved to be given up on." "A mother never gives up on her son," she said simply, "and a real teacher never gives up on a student." That night, David drove home in his new car, reflecting on the extraordinary journey he had lived through in the last 2 years. From a bitter and discouraging teacher, he had transformed into someone who truly made a difference in the lives of young people. At home, Rebecca waited with curiosity to hear about the surprise Tyler had mentioned. "So, how was it?" David told her everything: the car, the transfer of the project's coordination, the hug, the words from Tyler and Mrs. Tanya. "You deserve it, David. You've changed so much in these 2 years. You've become the man I fell in love with again." "Tyler saved more than my career, Rebecca. He saved who I really am." In the months that followed, the project continued to grow. David used the car to visit other schools, pick up donated materials, and take students on visits to universities. Tyler, even after starting his professional career, continued volunteering on weekends. One Saturday, while David was organizing a class on financial mathematics, he received an unexpected call. Professor David, this is Madison from the class of 2019, remember me? Of course, Madison, how are you? I'm great. I'm finishing my business administration degree at NYU. Professor, I'm calling because I want to help with the project. How so? I heard you guys need someone to teach writing classes. I can help on Saturdays, David smiled. It was another fruit of their work sprouting. That would be wonderful, Madison. Can you come this Saturday? I can. And Professor? Yes? Thank you for having changed. You inspired many of us. Calls like that became more and more frequent. Former students who had benefited from David's transformation were returning as volunteers. The project became a network of mutual support that expanded organically. During the school's graduation ceremony in December, David was honored by the administration. When he went on stage to receive a recognition plaque, he saw dozens of familiar faces in the audience. Tyler, Margaret, many of the young people who had participated in the project, former students who were now volunteers. "This recognition isn't mine," he said into the microphone. "It belongs to all the young people who taught me that it's never too late to start over the right way." After the ceremony, there was a get-together. David was talking with some parents when Tyler approached. "Professor, there's someone who would like to meet you." David turned and saw a young man of about 20, well-dressed, holding a young woman's hand. "Professor David, this is Marcus. He also went through what I went through." "How so?" Marcus introduced himself timidly. "Professor, I studied at a school in Newark. I had a teacher who always said I wouldn't amount to anything, that people from my social class had no future." David felt a tightness in his chest. "And what happened? I almost gave up for real. But when I heard your story and Tyler's, when I saw that it was possible for a teacher to truly change, I decided not to give up on my dreams." "And did you succeed?" "I graduated from law school last year, and now I want to start a project similar to yours in my area." David was moved. The transformation that had started with him and Tyler was spreading like ripples in a pond. "It will be an honor to help you, Marcus." "Actually," said Tyler, "Marcus and I have already been talking about it. We want to expand the project to other cities." "Really?" "We want to create a national network. Bridges to the Future project in several cities, always with the same philosophy, to believe in the potential of every young person." David could hardly believe it. What had started as an apology was becoming a movement. Months later, the first branch of the project was inaugurated in Newark, coordinated by Marcus. Other cities followed: Jersey City, Yonkers, White Plains. Tyler, now promoted at the company where he worked, used part of his salary to fund the expansion. Margaret, tireless at 75, traveled to the new branches to train the volunteers. On one of these trips, David and Margaret were driving back from Philadelphia, where they had helped open another project branch. "Mrs. Margaret," David said while driving, "do you have any idea what you started when you decided to help Tyler?" "I just saw a smart boy being wasted. I did what any decent person would do." "No, Mrs. Margaret, you did what a special person does. You saw potential where others saw problems. Just like you did afterward. I only learned from you, and from Tyler." "David, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When my husband passed, I thought my life had lost its purpose. I thought I had nothing left to contribute to the world. And now? Now I know that the purpose of life isn't what we receive, but what we give. And you helped me discover that again." The two continued their journey in a comfortable silence, each reflecting on the extraordinary transformations they had witnessed and been a part of. 3 years after the car was handed over, the Bridges to the Future project was present in 15 cities across New York State. More than 1,000 young people had been directly helped, and hundreds of them had gained admission to public universities. Tyler, now a graduated engineer working for a major tech company, continued as the general coordinator of the network. David had become the pedagogical director of all the branches. Margaret, despite her advanced age, remained active as a consultant. It was a Saturday in December when David received a call that would change everything again. "Professor David, this is William Schneider from the State Department of Education." "Good afternoon." "Professor, we've been following the work of the Bridges to the Future project. The results are impressive. Thank you." We'd like to make a proposal. How about we turn this into public policy? Take it to the entire state. David almost dropped the phone. How do you mean? We want to officialize the project, provide government support, expand it to all regions of the state. Would you be willing to coordinate this? After hanging up, David immediately called Tyler and Margaret. An hour later, the three were gathered at Margaret's house discussing the proposal. It's an incredible opportunity, said Tyler. Imagine how many young people we can help. But it's also a huge responsibility, Margaret pondered. Will we be able to maintain the essence of the project on such a large scale? We'll have to try, said David. We can't waste a chance to make a difference in the lives of thousands of young people. The meeting went on into the night. They discussed structure, methodology, and ways to maintain quality during such an ambitious expansion. You know what moves me the most in all of this? David said at one point. What? Asked Tyler and Margaret. To think that it all started with my mistake, with my cruelty, and look where we are. It wasn't your mistake that brought this about, Tyler corrected. It was your courage to recognize the mistake and your determination to fix it. And it was your generous heart that allowed for forgiveness, Margaret added. It was our partnership, David concluded. Alone, none of us would have achieved this. 6 months later, the Bridges to the Future program was officially launched as a public policy of New York State. David was appointed state coordinator, Tyler became director of operations, and Margaret was invited to be the lead pedagogical consultant. At the launch ceremony, held at the state capitol, David looked out at the audience and saw hundreds of familiar faces, students who had participated in the project, former students who had become volunteers, parents whose children had been helped. When he was called to the stage to speak, David carried in his heart the emotion of the entire journey. 5 years ago, he began, I was a bitter teacher who no longer believed in the potential of young people. Today I am here because one of those young people taught me that it's never too late to start over. He searched for Tyler in the audience and waved. Tyler Wilson showed me that true education isn't about transmitting knowledge. It's about believing in people and giving them opportunities to shine. The applause was long and warm. After the ceremony, there was a party to celebrate the launch. David was talking with some regional coordinators when he felt a hand on his shoulder. Professor David, said a familiar voice. He turned and saw Jessica, the girl Tyler had helped years ago in school. Jessica, how are you? I'm well, Professor. I graduated with a degree in mathematics last year, and now I'm working as the project coordinator in the Pittsburgh area. David smiled, another circle closing. I'm so proud, Jessica. Professor, I wanted to thank you. For what? For changing, for becoming the teacher I needed. If it weren't for you and Tyler, I would have given up on math in my sophomore year. You always had potential, Jessica. We just helped you discover it. That's what I'm trying to do now with my students, trying to be for them what you both were for me. Conversations like this repeated throughout the party. It was a chain of gratitude and transformation that seemed to have no end. When the party ended, David, Tyler, and Margaret met in the parking lot. We did it, said Margaret. We really did it. Did what? Asked Tyler. Proved that love can transform any situation, that forgiveness can create miracles, that real education can change the world. The three hugged, knowing that moment marked not an end, but an even greater new beginning. Where do we go now? Asked David. Wherever life takes us, replied Tyler, but always remembering our mission is to be a bridge for others. And to never again doubt anyone's potential, added Margaret. 2 years later, the program was present in every city in New York State. College admission rates among low-income youth had increased by 300%. Hundreds of volunteers worked on the projects, many of them former beneficiaries who returned to help others. Tyler had been promoted to manager at the company where he worked, but he still dedicated his weekends to the project. Margaret, at 79, still traveled across the state training new volunteers. David had become a national reference in inclusive education. One Saturday morning, the three met at the place where it all began, the school where Tyler studied, where David humiliated him, and where they later reconciled. Now the school housed the project's state training center. The room where Tyler had been humiliated had become a special classroom with a plaque on the door. Tyler Wilson Room, where dreams are reborn. "Can you believe this?" said David, standing in front of the plaque. "I believe it," replied Tyler. "I believe God works in mysterious ways." "And that every ending can be a new beginning," added Margaret. They entered the room, now equipped with modern computers, a rich library and motivational posters on the walls. "Tyler," said David, "do you remember what you felt when you sat in this room?" "I remember. Fear, shame, a desire to disappear." "And now?" Tyler looked around, seeing the hopeful faces of the young people arriving for another Saturday of study. "Now, I feel gratitude for having gone through that pain, because it prepared me to understand the pain of others, for having found you two who taught me that suffering can turn into purpose. And I," said David, "feel gratitude for having had the courage to change, even when it seemed impossible." "And I," concluded Margaret, "feel gratitude for having lived long enough to see that small acts of kindness can turn into great movements of change." The students began to arrive. Young people of 15, 16, 17, all with that same spark in their eyes that Tyler had when he started to believe in himself. "Good morning, everyone," said David, taking his position as teacher. "Ready for another day of discoveries?" The young people answered in unison, and David began the class. But first, he looked at Tyler and Margaret, who were sitting in the back of the room as they always did. "Today we're going to talk about transformations," said David, "about how math can teach us that every equation has a solution, even when it seems impossible at first." While explaining mathematical concepts, David intertwined life lessons. He spoke about persistence through complex problems, about patience through lengthy calculations, about confidence through results that initially seemed wrong, but with the correct method, proved to be right. Tyler watched everything with a smile on his face. That man at the blackboard was completely different from the teacher who had humiliated him years ago. But in a way, David was also the same person. He had just rediscovered who he truly was beneath the bitterness and fear. At the end of the class, when the students had left, the three of them were alone in the room. "You know," said Margaret, "this might be one of my last times here." David and Tyler were startled. "Why, Mrs. Davis?" "I'm 80 years old. I can't do this forever, but I don't need to anymore. You've created something that will continue to exist regardless of me." "You are an essential part of all this," said Tyler. "I was important at the beginning. Now you are capable of flying on your own." "Never alone," corrected David. "Always together, always being bridges for each other." Margaret smiled and hugged the two men who had become like sons to her. "I promise you one thing," she said. "I will watch everything from afar. And when you doubt if you are on the right path, you will remember this conversation and know that you are." That night, David drove home in the same car that Tyler had given him years ago. The vehicle already had a few scratches and wasn't new anymore, but it kept running perfectly, taking David from one project to another, from one city to another, always in the service of education. Arriving home, he found Rebecca waiting for him with an envelope in her hand. "This arrived for you today," she said. David opened it and found a handwritten letter. It was from a young man named Brian from Buffalo, a participant in one of the project's most distant branches. "Professor David," the letter said, "I don't know if you remember me. I participated in the project in 2023. At the time, I was almost giving up on studying. My teacher said I wasn't cut out for math, that I should focus on manual labor. When you came to give a lecture in our city and told your story with Tyler, something changed inside me. I realized that teachers can be wrong too, and that I shouldn't let one person's opinion define my future. Today I want to tell you that I passed the entrance exam for engineering. It wasn't easy, but I never gave up. And now I want to be a teacher, to do for other young people what you did for me. Thank you for changing your own life. That gave me permission to change mine." David read the letter 3 times, his eyes welling up. "Another miracle?" asked Rebecca, who knew her husband's reactions well. "Another young person who discovered their potential," replied David. "Another life that changed direction." "Do you have any idea how many letters like this you've received?" David thought. In recent years, he had received hundreds of letters, emails, messages from young people whose lives had been touched by the project. "Many," he said. "But each one still moves me as if it were the first. Why? Because each one represents a person who didn't give up on themselves, a person who decided to fight for their dreams, a person who will do the same for other people." That night, before sleeping, David did something that had become routine, a prayer of gratitude. Gratitude for having found his way back to who he really was. Gratitude for Tyler having been generous enough to forgive him. Gratitude for Margaret having planted the first seed. Gratitude for being able to make a difference in the lives of other young people. And special gratitude for having learned that it's never too late to start over the right way. 5 years after that special Saturday when Tyler handed the car keys to David, the three of them reunited for a very special occasion: Tyler's wedding. The ceremony was simple but moving, held in the garden of Margaret's house. Tyler married Emily, an engineer he had met in college who had also become a volunteer for the project. During the party, David was invited to speak. "Tyler," he said, holding the microphone with emotion, "you transformed my life in a way I could never have imagined. You taught me that mistakes can turn into successes, that wounds can turn into wisdom, that enemies can become family." The audience applauded. "But the most important thing you taught me was that true education doesn't happen in the classroom. It happens when one person decides to believe in another person, regardless of their circumstances." Tyler approached David, and the two hugged for a long time. "Professor," Tyler said into the microphone, "you saved my life twice. First, when you apologized and admitted you were wrong. Second, when you gave me the chance to help you with the project. You taught me that forgiving isn't forgetting, but creating something new and beautiful in place of what was hurt." The party continued late into the night. David watched Tyler dancing with Emily, saw Margaret talking animatedly with young people who had participated in the project, saw dozens of people whose lives had become intertwined because of a story that began with pain but turned into something beautiful. "What are you thinking about?" asked Rebecca, approaching her husband. "I'm thinking about how mysterious life is, how the worst moments can turn into the best, how people can completely change when they find true purpose. And how love always wins in the end," added Rebecca. "Always," agreed David. "Always." End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of this story of transformation? Do you believe people can really change like Professor David? Leave your opinion in the comments. We really want to know what you think. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one. Your participation is very important to us.